St. Colin, Minnesota. I reserve the right to yield to Gandhi from South Carolina.
That is right.
Thank you. This is totally unfeasible because the legislators during their 2-year positions will not have sufficient time to submit legislation, fundraise for that legislation, and then move to passage of such legislation. Passage of this proposal would decrease the quality of legislation, making it less drastic because legislators would want to make sure that they ensure their own re-election, making them less likely to tax more immediately and more likely to pay for it themselves. It will slow down our already slowly moving Congress. Thank you. I yield my time to Delegate Rugani.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Thank you, Chair. I'm in opposition to this proposal because it inhibits what our government is trying to do for our citizens and what it has done for years. For years, our government has taken actions to implement mandates, the most recent being health care, so Americans can reap the necessary benefits immediately and pay for them over time when funds are more accessible. We must realize that these are benefits put in place to be available for our generation, the next generation, and generations to come. We must also note that this proposal includes no constitutional amendments or no committee to watch over Congress to make sure that they're actively following the purpose of this proposal. So essentially what we will have is a true Congress implementing in their legislation 1% tax increase for 14 years or so, and then in 15 years they will just implement the real basis of their tax. Realistically, this does nothing to stop generational theft. There's a reason our real Congress would not pass the proposal, and this is because it completely inhibits the growth of our nation. There's a reason our country can have a multi-trillion-dollar debt and still be recognized as a world power, and that's because time and time again, our country has shown the ability to rise up out of recession, such as with the New Deal, and the world understands that. Why don't we? Thank you.
Delegate Xander Mono from the state of Mississippi. Thank you, Sir Chair. I wish you the rest of my time to Burnett.
That is right.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we must support this proposal. This proposal holds government officials accountable for the wasteful spending and the gross wastefulness of earmarks and fiscal irresponsibility. Today, officials will not be held accountable for their actions because the taxes they impose will not come into effect until years after they are out of office. Thank you. I wish you the rest of my time.
Zach Burnett, represent Kentucky. Thank you, Sir Chair. Let's talk about what happens when government finances programs through future taxes. They borrow money from banks. Because banks have less money to lend, interest rates increase in businesses and individuals take fewer loans, which decreases investment and entrepreneurship, stagnating our economy. Under this proposal in Obama's pay-go, every expense would be paid for almost upfront, saving billions of dollars in interest rates. A delegate earlier mentioned something about the Great Depression. I'd like to point out that if the government had adequate spending habits to cover the cost before the Great Depression, it never would have happened, so there was never ever been any reason to have a huge stimulus package like that, and there are now new regulations to prevent a Great Depression. The even more recent was to prevent a recession like we've seen. Okay, let's look at this on a smaller scale. For those of you with credit cards, you understand that it's possible to purchase something with credit and pay for it at the end of the month. However, if you don't, you get slammed with late fees and interest rates and end up paying more money than what your original purchase was even worth. However, if you apply what the government does, it's like if your older brother paid for something with a credit card and then you had to pay for whatever he purchased months or even years after lots of interest has accumulated. So often we see corruption in government, and unless we hold our officials accountable, it's not going to get better. By passing this proposal, we take a step to ridding our government of financial corruption. Thank you, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Sir Chair. Jake Friedler from the California delegation, and I reserve my right to yield to Delegate Rorty from Delaware. Thank you. This proposal has the potential to completely eliminate the federal government's ability to protect American citizens and their money and their livelihood during times of economic hardship. It's commonly accepted by economists that when the economy slows and the GDP drops, the government must infuse money into the economy, whether that be in the form of stimulus, tax breaks, public works, or whatever floats your Keynesian boat. The federal government already has to specify where the money for this plan is going to come from, and that usually comes in the form of a tax or in another spending cut. But these taxes and cuts are usually put off for a reason, because if they were implemented in the time of economic hardship, recession, or depression, they would only serve to prolong the hardship. Imagine if we had had this proposal in effect during our recent recession. Congress would have had to implement taxes on the same American people it was trying to put money in the hands of. That means we're putting money in people's hands and then taking it right back out of their pockets through a tax. If we want to be able to stimulate the economy, if we want to be able to get the American people out of recession, we cannot pass this proposal. It's absolutely ridiculous and contrary to common sense. These taxes do not even have to be generational theft. They can be put off just 4, 5, or 6 years so that they're at the end of the business cycle and will not be in place in the time of recession. But with this proposal, they have to go into effect within 1 year, which is when the recession is still going on. It might seem unfair to pass off the taxes to future citizens, but it's also the only way to do it. We pass them on because our government knows that there will come times in the future where we will have an increased ability to spend. Even if this isn't a possibility and the spend goes into the deficit, so be it. That is necessary. A previous speaker claimed that this proposal would ensure we could only pass things we can afford, but if we can afford it, it's probably not strong enough legislation. We pass things we can't afford because that has been what's proven time and time again to actually help the people when they need help, when they need money.
All right, thank you. That right to yield to body from. Thank you. That is your right once you display your placard.
When legislatures implement policies that include generational taxing, they are usually operating from a discredited economic theory, the Keynesian economic theory. John Maynard Keynes was an economist during the early 20th century. He believed that it was necessary to raise debt in order to continue the boom in capitalism. When asked about how they would pay off the debt, however, in the long term, Keynes replied, "In the long term, we are dead." This quote uncovers a fundamental unfairness in Keynesian economics. It always harms the future in order to make our lives comfortable. How is this fair? How is this right? This is not right. This is not what America is about. Thank you, and I yield to Bonnie.
Bonnie from Great City, Mississippi. I want to point out a few things that the speakers have said. President Obama promised us when he signed his $787 stimulus package that unemployment would go down. At the time, it was 7%. As we have all seen since he signed it in February of 2009, unemployment has skyrocketed 2 to 3%. Also, I want to point out that it was not the New Deal by FDR that improved the economy. It was World War II that improved our economy. FDR's New Deal slowed us down 10 years, an entire decade. I also want to point out another thing. When you give away free stuff and when you give out entitlement programs like Greece has, when there's free stuff, who pays for it? Later generations. If you want to fix the problem in America, make our Congress pay for the things they have. And let me also say that the Democrats voted 60 to 40 to raise the federal deficit on numerous times, $562 billion with a B, as someone else previously said. I yield the rest of my time to the chair.